Hi, this is Kendall Boyson, professional life and recovery coach, and you're listening to Encouragementology, the practice of instilling hope. Hi there. Thanks for joining me. On this show, we're exploring something that shows up in almost every part of life, yet we rarely sit down and separate it out. The difference between critical and cynical. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to take something at face value, especially when the information comes fast, polished, and wrapped in confidence? Or maybe you've had the opposite reaction, where you hear something new and immediately think, yeah, right, and you shut it down before it even has a chance. Somewhere between believing everything and doubting everything is the space we're trying to find today. We live in a world that delivers opinions like a conveyor belt, nonstop, loud, and often disguised as fact. Articles, posts, videos, conversations, experts, your cousin's cousin, all chiming in with certainty. And if you've ever wondered, how am I supposed to know what's actually true? You're not alone. It can feel overwhelming, and honestly, it's tempting to pick one or two defaults. Go along with the ride without questioning anything, or armor up and become suspicious of everything. But neither one really leads us to clarity. The more I think about it, the more I realize how important it is to bring your own critical eye to what you see, hear, and even feel. Not in a confrontational way, not in a let me prove you wrong way, but in a grounded, thoughtful way. It's your job, my job, to ask questions, explore, and do a little digging. To understand not just what might be true, but what might be false. To recognize that believing something at face value can be irresponsible, especially when your decisions, your peace of mind, and your perspective are on the line. But here's where today's topic gets interesting. Being critical and being cynical are not the same thing. One opens the door to growth. The other slams it shut. One helps you navigate the world with clarity. The other keeps you stuck behind a wall of distrust. And if you've ever felt yourself drifting towards cynicism, maybe from burnout, disappointment, or just being tired of sorting through so much noise, you're not alone there either. Today, we're digging into the difference between the two. We'll talk about what a healthy, responsible, critical mindset looks like. We'll untangle how cynicism sneaks in and shuts us down. And we'll explore what it means to trust your gut, do your homework, and clean your room. That idea that you need your own inner house in order before you can make sense of the world around you. So, let's take a deep breath, pull up a chair, and get curious together. This is an important conversation, and one that just might change the way you see yourself and the world. Ready? Let's jump in. We'll start by getting really clear on what we're talking about, because the words critical and cynical often get lumped together. People will say, I'm just being realistic, or I'm not gullible, when really they're describing two very different ways of moving through the world. A critical mindset is thoughtful, curious, and discerning. It's the willingness to pause for a moment, look at something from different angles, and ask, is this true? Does this make sense? What's the intention here? What am I missing? It's about investigation, not accusation. It's about clarity, not combat. And it's rooted in a sense of responsibility. The understanding that your perspective is shaped by the work you're willing to do. You're not just accepting things because they were handed to you. You're choosing what to believe through your own exploration. Being critical is an active process. It requires energy. It asks you to stay awake and engaged, even when the world is noisy and confusing. It's like holding up a lantern in a dark room. You're not trying to debunk everything. You're simply trying to see. Now compare that to cynicism. Cynicism can look like critical thinking at first glance, but the motivation is totally different. Cynicism is rooted in mistrust, not the healthy kind, but the heavy kind. It assumes the worst before the story even begins. It says people are out to deceive. Nothing is what it seems. Why bother trying? Cynicism shuts the door on possibilities, and once the door is shut, there's nowhere else to go. No conversation, no discovery, no growth, just a quiet internal crossing of the arms. While being critical opens your mind, cynicism closes it. One helps you navigate the world more confidently. The other keeps you stuck on the sidelines, convinced everything is a trick. And here's the tricky part. Cynicism often starts from a real human place. Maybe you were hurt. Maybe you trusted the wrong person or believed something that wasn't true. Maybe you've been overwhelmed by too much information for too long. Cynicism becomes a kind of armor, a way to protect yourself from feeling fooled or vulnerable again. But the problem is, armor doesn't just keep danger out, it keeps growth out too. So how do you tell the difference in yourself? One way is to listen to your internal tone. A critical mindset sounds like curiosity. Let me understand this better. Cynicism sounds like a closed door. I already know how this ends. One asks questions, the other avoids the effort of asking altogether. And that brings us to the deeper part of this conversation, how these mindsets affect the way you see the world, the way you make decisions, and even the way you see yourself. Because the truth is, a healthy, critical mindset requires a level of personal responsibility. It asks you to do your homework, to check your assumptions, to, as I like to say, clean your room. You have to know what's going on inside your own mind and heart before you can make sense of the world outside. We'll dive deeper into that, along with some perspectives and ideas from thinkers who've wrestled with these concepts long before social media, breaking news banners, or even algorithms. When you start digging into the difference between critical and being cynical, you quickly realize this isn't a new problem. Long before smartphones, headlines, or information overload, people were wrestling with how to sort truth from noise. And some of the clearest insights come from voices who remind us the way we think matters just as much as what we think about. One idea that always stands out to me comes from the philosopher William James, who wrote, "A great many people think they're thinking when they're merely rearranging their prejudices." It's a strong statement, but it hits the heart of our topic. When we're truly thinking critically, we're examining something new. We're open, curious, willing to challenge even our own assumptions. Cynicism, on the other hand, is often just our old disappointments resurfacing, dressed up as judgment. It feels like thinking, but it isn't forward moving. Another perspective comes from research on information overload. A study from the University of California found that the average person consumes over 34 gigabytes of information a day. That's the equivalent of reading a small novel every single day, just from the digital noise around us. No wonder we're tired. No wonder it feels easier to either accept things without question or dismiss everything automatically. Our brains were never designed to process this much input without some kind of intentional filtering. Critical thinking gives us that filter. It's the mental tool that helps us separate signal from noise. And then there's the writer Anne Lamott, who has this wonderful line: cynicism is just a self-protective form of laziness. She doesn't mean it in a harsh, judgmental way. What she's pointing out is that cynicism often becomes the shortcut. It's easier to say, I don't believe it, or they're all the same, than to sit with uncertainty and gather more information, or admit we don't know yet. Critical thinking, in contrast, takes effort. It requires attention. It asks us to stay open long enough to get a clearer picture. One more reference I love comes from psychologist Daniel Kahneman, who talks about the two modes of thinking: the quick, reactive kind, and the slower, more deliberate kind. Cynicism almost always lives in the fast, reactive space, a knee-jerk no. Critical thinking, however, lives in the slower space. It pauses, it evaluates, it asks, what else could be true? That single question is often the dividing line between reacting out of habit and responding with awareness. When you pull these perspectives together, James, Lamott, Kahneman, and the data of information overload, you start to see a common thread. Being critical is an intentional practice. It's something you choose, something you build, something you show up for. Cynicism is what happens when we stop being intentional and let our past hurts or current overwhelm make our decisions for us. And that's where your own gut comes in. We love to say, trust your gut, but here's the part we don't always talk about. Your gut is only as reliable as the clarity behind it. If your inner space is messy, if you're exhausted, overloaded, unhealed, or running on autopilot, your gut might actually be responding from a place of protection, not truth. That's where the idea of clean your room becomes more than a metaphor. It's about getting your inner world in order so you can actually trust the signals you're getting. When you're grounded, rested, aware, and connected to your values, your gut becomes a powerful guide. When you're cynical, burned out, or overwhelmed, your gut is more likely to say no to everything, not because everything is wrong, but because you're tired of being disappointed. So the real question becomes, am I thinking critically, or am I simply reacting? Am I filtering information, or am I just shutting it out? Am I open to learning, or am I protecting myself by staying closed? Let's do a little real-time check-in, because this topic gets much clearer when you can actually feel the difference in yourself. You don't have to overthink it. Just listen to how your mind responds as we walk through a few scenarios. Think about the last time you heard a headline, saw a post, or someone told you something surprising. What was your first instinct? Did you lean in with curiosity, or did you lean back with skepticism? Neither one is wrong, but the feeling behind it matters. For example, imagine someone shares a new idea or invites you to try something different. A critical response might sound like, interesting, tell me more. I want to look into that. There's a sense of movement. You're open, but you're not blindly accepting. You're gathering a little more light before you decide. A cynical response feels heavier. Yeah, that sounds like a gimmick. Or, I doubt that works. Or even, people always exaggerate. Notice how that tone shuts things down before anything has a chance to breathe. Let's test a few internal statements. If you hear yourself say, I need to see more before I decide, that's critical. Or, they're probably lying. Of course, that's cynical. What else could be true here? Critical. It's all pointless. Cynical. Now think about a personal situation. Maybe somebody disappointed you in the past or a plan didn't go your way. How does that shape the way you approach new things today? If you're honest, do you ever avoid opportunities because you assume they won't work out anyway? That's cynicism in disguise, and it usually shows up as protection, not principle. It's your brain saying, let's not get hurt again. A critical approach, even in the face of a past hurt, sounds more like, let me see what's different this time. Or I'm willing to look, but I'm also going to be thoughtful. There's a sense of personal authority here. Here's another way to tell the difference. When you're being critical, your mind feels engaged, curious, and even energized. When you're being cynical, your mind feels tired, closed, drained before you ever begin. You can feel it in your body too. Critical thinking gives you that slight forward lean. You're interested. Cynicism makes you lean back. You're retreating. So ask yourself now, when the words feel noisy or overwhelming, do you open or close? Do you get curious or protective? Do you examine or withdraw? This isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. Because once you can tell the difference in yourself, that quick emotional shift, that immediate inner tone, you're already halfway to choosing the mindset that serves you best. Now that we've explored the difference between being critical and being cynical, let's talk about how to actually live in that healthy, grounded space where you're discerning without shutting down. This is where the real work happens. It's not about becoming an expert researcher or questioning every single thing in your day. It's about having a simple, reliable process for how you approach information, decisions, and even your own reactions. So, here are a few practical ways to stay critical without drifting into cynicism. Number 1, slow the reaction, even by 3 seconds. You don't need an hour of analysis to think critically. Sometimes all you need is a short pause before you decide what you believe. That tiny space breaks the automatic believe everything or reject everything reflex. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself a simple question. What else could be true here? That one question invites clarity without inviting overwhelm. Number 2, check your emotional filter. Before you decide whether something is true or trustworthy, ask, what emotion am I bringing into this moment? If you're tired, frustrated, overwhelmed, or carrying something from earlier in the day, your filter is cloudy. Cynicism thrives in cloudy moments. A critical mindset requires a clearer lens. You don't have to fix the emotion, you just have to acknowledge it. Awareness alone softens the reaction. Number 3, separate the content from the storyteller. We tend to believe or dismiss things based on who's saying them, not what is being said. Critical thinking looks at the idea itself, the logic, the evidence, the consistency. Cynicism targets the person. I don't trust them. They're biased. They always bend things. A helpful shift is to ask, if I heard the same information from someone else, would I react the same way? That recenters your judgment on the information instead of the personality. Number 4, do a quick internal room check. This ties into the idea of cleaning your room. Before you form an opinion, look inward. Are old stories coloring new information? Are you reacting from past hurts? Are you jumping to protect yourself from disappointment? A critical mindset says, let me examine my own house before I decide what to do with this new thing. This isn't about self-doubt. It's about self-honesty. And number 5, clarify your goal before you decide. Critical thinking works best when we know what we're looking for. Ask yourself, am I trying to understand or am I trying to avoid? Understanding opens your mind. Obviously, avoidance closes it. When you know the outcome you're aiming for, clarity, growth, peace, progress, it's easier to stay open long enough to see the full picture without falling into cynicism. These tools don't take hours of special training. They're quick, human, everyday choices that keep you grounded in truth instead of slipping into mistrust. And the beautiful part is, the more you practice them, the more natural they become. You start catching yourself before you slide into cynicism. You start feeling the difference between caution and collapse. And you start trusting your own ability to navigate the noise of the world. If the A side is the message we've been exploring, that being critical is healthy, responsible, and necessary, then the B side is the quieter truth underneath it. And here it is. Sometimes we label ourselves as cynical because it feels safer than admitting we're overwhelmed, uncertain, or afraid of being wrong. Think about it for a second. Cynicism often walks around wearing the mask of strength. It sounds sharp. It sounds smart. It sounds like we're too wise to be fooled. But the B side tells a different story. Cynicism isn't strength at all. It's a shield. It's a shortcut. It's self-protection dressed up as wisdom. Here's the twist most of us don't consider. Cynicism often shows up when we've stopped trusting ourselves, not the world. If you've ever said, I don't believe anything anymore, or people are basically out to get something, or everything is a spin, that might feel like clarity, but it's really exhaustion talking. It's the emotional version of throwing your hands up and saying, I can't deal with this, so I'll just reject everything. The B side of this topic reminds us that cynicism is almost never the first emotion. It's the last one. The one that moves in after curiosity, hope, or trust have been worn down. And here's where it gets personal. A lot of us have had moments when we thought we were being objective or realistic, but if we're honest, we were really being defensive. We were protecting ourselves from disappointment or embarrassment or vulnerability. Cynicism can feel like control, but the B-side truth is that it actually takes our power away. When you dismiss everything, you stop choosing, you stop engaging, you stop learning. The door stays closed, but so do the windows. Critical thinking, on the other hand, requires courage. It requires stepping into the unknown with your eyes open. It's much riskier because it means you might discover something that challenges you. You might have to change your mind. You might have to rethink something that you were sure about. But that's also where growth lives. That's where wisdom actually comes from. Here's another angle on the B side. Sometimes we use cynicism as a shortcut when we don't want to clean our room, so to speak. When our inner world feels messy or unsettled, cynicism gives us permission to stop trying. To say, it's all nonsense, instead of doing the inner sorting. But the truth is, if your internal space is cluttered, old hurts, resentments, insecurities, everything outside will look suspicious. Not because it is, but because you haven't cleared enough space inside to see clearly. So the B side asks you this: is your cynicism really insight, or is it a sign that you're tired? Is it wisdom, or is it weariness? Is it clarity or self-protection? The beautiful thing about the B side is that it reminds you there's always another track to play. You don't have to stay in a closed-off posture. You can reopen your mind. You can choose curiosity again. You can trust yourself enough to explore, ask some questions, and make thoughtful decisions. Remember, the A side is the familiar story we all know, but the B side, that's where the deeper tracks live. Pull up a chair and let me tell you an old story about a traveler who came upon two windows in a small town marketplace. One window looked dusty and dark, smudged with fingerprints and streaks of old rain. The other window, just a few feet away, was clear and clean, letting in the bright afternoon light. Curious, the traveler asked the shopkeeper, "Why do you keep one window spotless and the other one so dirty?" The shopkeeper smiled and said, "Those windows represent how people walk through the world. Some look through the clean one, and some look through the dirty one. The funny thing is, both windows show the same view: the town square, the fountain, the family walking by. But the people who look through the dirty window swear the world is dull and gloomy. They insist the fountain is murky and the people seem distant. The ones who look through the clean window, they see color, they see movement, they see possibility. The scene hasn't changed. Only the lens has." The traveler stood there for a moment, watching people come and go. Some paused at the bright window, taking in a cheerful view. Others barely glanced at it and went straight to the dark, smudged one, shaking their heads as if confirming something they already believed. Finally, the traveler asked, "Why don't you clean the dirty window so everyone has a clearer view?" The shopkeeper laughed gently. "Oh, I clean it all the time, but it doesn't stay that way. People press their hands against it when they're frustrated. They lean on it when they're tired. They breathe heavy on it when they feel overwhelmed. The window doesn't make them cynical. Their own state of mind does. So it fogs up again and again. The clean window is the one people approach with curiosity. They walk up gently. They look. They wonder. They let the light in." The traveler nodded, seeing the deeper message. The world isn't different from one window to the other, but we are. And that's the moral of the story. Your view of the world is shaped not just by what you're looking at, but by the state of the window you're looking through. If you want to share encouragementology with a friend who needs to know they're not alone in this journey of self-discovery, you can visit encouragementology.com or anywhere you stream your content to receive this episode and all others. Check out the show notes for the 5-day journaling companion and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for additional encouragement throughout the week. So I challenge you, take one moment this week to notice which window you're looking through. When new information comes your way, pause before you react. Ask yourself whether you're leaning in with curiosity or leaning back with cynicism. Choose the version of you that trusts your ability to think, explore, and decide for yourself. I know you can do it. Thank you for listening to Encouragementology with Kendall Boyson, where we find positive ways to handle some of life's challenges.
stumbled through until the path was clear. That's when I found you.